The sound is not working. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can't hear either.
Oh, that's much better. There we go.
No, that was, yeah, that's somebody who's remote participant. What? No, I don't, it's supposed to be from that.
Now I hear. Now I can hear, I think.
Do you hear me? This is Liz Cobb speaking.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, well,
Can you hear me?
I'm gonna ask that, go ahead.
Can you hear me, Nancy?
Yes, I can hear everyone now. I couldn't hear anything before. Now I can hear everybody.
Okay. I'll suggest that if the sound is out again, to just speak up so we know you can't hear versus are waiting for a question. If anybody else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so.
All right, so I can move on it.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, that was it. So even if you weren't there, can I move on?
Yes. You can, you don't have to. I mean, somebody, those that were present could take the vote on it if you wanted to.
I guess I didn't think I could because I wasn't present at the meeting. I did approve, obviously, what was said, and I did wind up with this, but you'd still be a quorum, right, without me?
At that time we were, because Joe wasn't yet on the committee, I think.
Right.
Right, in December?
But the three of us.
Right,
Could.
could be a quorum, right? Yeah.
So
I mean, I just, whatever is the right thing to do. but-
why don't we'll let Kate
Okay.
make the motion.
I make a motion to accept the December 5th, 2022 select board joint meeting with the personnel board.
Yes, thank you. Just a second.
Yeah, second. Yeah.
In favor,
Yes.
Liz Cobbs, yes,
Yes.
and Kate, and Nancy, we know that you have no objection.
I have no objections whatsoever.
Okay.
So I just want to confirm, and since we have Terry online, that there, to be clear that everyone understands that I wrote those after listening to the video and just put it as an executive summary only for the hour when we were presenting. It didn't include what Amy then added and presented. So that, I think I mentioned that in the minutes. I don't have them in front of me right now. One, and the second point is that the select board minutes did not align with what I'd summarized. So I reached out to Terry and she was going to confirm or had an addendum to the minutes or something that clarified what we had agreed with the select board were now the objectives that were outlined in those tables. So Terry, do you want to comment on that?
Well, I do remember you reached out, Liz. Thank you. And I dropped the ball on it. I apologize. And you wanted me to review both sets of minutes? or,
Well, I think you were working with the person who takes notes for the select board meetings. And since you had, I think the select board had, the last I heard was the select board had already approved the December 5th minutes.
right,
So there was another procedure to follow to ensure, because none of the agreed upon objectives that we presented were in the select board minutes. And
Wow.
I'm concerned about that. I'd like it to be clear that the goals we agreed to were agreed to.
okay. My suggestion is, Liz, if you and I could talk offline, because I'm not sure I remember exactly what happened in the December meeting right now. Months. How
I'll
about-
send you the emails and we can talk after.
Right,
Okay.
send me your phone number too, and a good time to talk.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you, thank you. So we're now to approval of the minutes of April 12th, 2023, which are in the packet. Any comments, any suggested?
No, believe me.
Any recommendations on the new format? It's quite different, right? I was using everyone's names and really trying to clarify, but I summarized in this case. And is everyone all okay with that? Yeah.
They're still very organized and very complete, so let's see.
All right,
All
I'll
right.
entertain a
So
motion.
I will make a motion
Okay.
to accept the minutes of April 12th, 2023.
Okay. And moved and seconded. So all those in favor, Liz Cobbs? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Nancy Crowley, Bill Marachek. Aye.
Okay, now we are officially up to date on all minutes. Okay, so we are in good shape for 2023 at the end of April, but that's fine.
That's good. I
We
mean,
got there, right?
that's-
So
Set the bar high, right?
before town meeting, how about that? We had before
Yes.
something.
Right.
Okay,
So we're going to move on to the third item on the agenda, which is the class and comp study. And I'll let Amy discuss the status of employee requests. Right. Please, thanks.
So, first to recap, this plan as a whole is a completely new plan as proposed, by GovHR in collaboration and with the support and recommendations from me and the town manager and support of all the department heads. It represents what we think could carry us through at least to the hopefully for quite a while, but even in the immediate future, every position need that we can imagine. So it gathered information from existing employees about their positions, gathered information about vacant positions, information about new positions or ones that we felt would be helpful to have even available going forward. So for example, just the easiest way I can think of is one called crew member in one of the grades, and senior crew member. We don't have those right now, but we think that those would be helpful tools for us going forward to have positions that we can place people in, and then perhaps they move forward if they get licenses and things like that. So it's encompassing a lot of things. It also addresses position changes. We've had employees whose roles have changed, and there were a number of people that had additional duties assigned over time. And at this point, we were looking at how do we, is it appropriate for those additional duties to be rolled into their ongoing position? And if so, then let's make sure that the positions get classified that way. So this represents a completely new plan, all reviewed along the way by GovHR, by management, by employees. And so when we talk about the reviews with employees, so they have data on that. There's been a multi-stage approach. Again, employees were involved in providing information about their positions at the beginning. GovHR then went through and did a preliminary classification and their recommendations on building a plan based on this organization using a tool they use all over the country, but applying in a way that worked for our organization and the unique positions we have, or the non-unique positions we have, combination, to make it work, and build salary schedules, ranges based on market data that they gathered for what we call benchmark positions. They wanted to have a sample of positions from every grade to use as data points to build. So the employees saw their preliminary proposals, and at that point at employee meetings, and were given an opportunity to provide feedback and to what we called a request for reconsideration. If they felt that there was something about their position that didn't seem right, they could submit a request for reconsideration. And I'm sorry, off the top of my head, I went through around 50 or something of them, of one nature or another, and GovHR took a look at those and heard the feedback and went back and worked with again, the town manager, myself, department heads, and said, let's take another, now that we've got more input, let's work further. And so then the next version came that addressed many of those. When employees submitted a request for reconsideration, many of those were addressed through GovHR's next version. But we again gave employees the opportunity to say, this still doesn't address what I think something was missed. And so rather than just saying to employees that GovHR, first pass was, we don't have enough information to recommend a change, we said to the employees, we do a more thorough internal review. And so that is what I have been working on considerably, investing a lot of time in working with these employees that still felt that there was something not right or they didn't understand it. So I've met with other department heads in the departments that had employees that requested that. They've just been a constant participant in this process to make sure that we were getting the right information, understanding, and then I met with these 26 employees or communicated them in some way. Most of them I met with. A couple of them we could resolve a few things through email because they were of a different nature, or a couple of them it was a question about individual compensation, which is the next stage versus the class and comp. We met with them. We also, during the same time period, identified some other things that needed adjustment as we were looking at it again and finding that there are some other positions that perhaps should be in there as placeholders for the future, or that as we looked at one employee's request, we might have said, well, that can't change in a box. Everything we looked at was about looking at the entire system. So if I was talking with an employee and we were talking about one of the job factors, the classification factors, and I thought, well, maybe the working conditions score should be higher. I always let them know that I'm going to make sure I'm looking at that from the system as a whole to see that it's consistently applied. So we did that. As a result of that process, I made recommendations to the town manager. And in your packet, there was a memo that said specifically which ones I was recommending changes for. So again, for some of them, they are positions that employees initiated that and they hold those positions and they ask for change. Others are a few new titles or positions that are represented there. I also had some that I did not recommend changes with. Substantially, I think that by the end of most of the meetings with employees, for employees that I wasn't going to recommend something, in many cases, I knew that at the end of the meeting, I was letting them know, I'd let them know what parts I would follow up on. There was, so employees that the position would impact the class and comp plan itself and what's going to town meeting. I gave those priority and I have let them know what my recommendation was and invited them to even come to this meeting if they wanted to make any statement, and advised them that I could also talk with them about if they weren't, if after it kind of settled and if they don't feel like it was all addressed, that we could explore if there are other avenues, which could be coming to the personnel board and after town meeting if there was something more. But, so that, there's that batch. Then I have a smaller batch of employees that hold positions that if their request for reconsideration resulted in a change, it wouldn't change the plan itself that's going to town meeting. So those were given second priority, but I really felt it was important to get to those people as soon as I could. So I completed all of those meetings and now I'm finished making those recommendations. When I say it doesn't impact the plan, as an example, if a administrative position that if the consultants recommended it be a grade 5 office coordinator and the employee thinks it should be grade 6 office administrator. Sorry, I haven't mastered all of the titles yet. Things like that, that if ultimately there's a recommendation that yes, it should move to that other classification, it doesn't change what town meeting's action is. They're approving the structure, the list of titles, those ranges. So, so not all of those employees have heard a result or know what I will recommend. I'm finishing those up now, and we'll get through town meeting, and then I think that by next week, all of them will have heard. And again, if they ultimately feel that I didn't resolve their request, then I can advise them if there's another step to take. Should they could bring that forward in some manner to the personnel board to look at it.
So Amy, could you give us an example of a request for reconsideration that would change the plan? Is it
Sure.
a
Yeah.
title? I'm not
Yeah,
quite.
so those are the ones that are actually in the memo. So on page 2 of my memo, I have a list of the actual changes that went in. So the building commissioner in the plan that was brought to public hearing and printed in the FinCom report, it showed it at grade 14. And I spoke with the employee that had what's that position and reviewed it. And actually this one is interesting because the piece that would bring it over into grade 15 relates to the number of positions supervised. And that is something that is changing right now. So when it was reviewed, then it wouldn't have impacted, but that's something that's been developing. So that changes the plan because the plan shows that particular classification title at grade 14. And this proposal is to take it out of grade 14 and put it in grade 15. So that changes it. But if there's a title that is going to stay in a grade because it's generically used, then it doesn't.
Okay, so the example you gave prior to that was administrative, and it's that position from 5 to 6 was a change in a title that's already in the plan.
Right, some of the titles we use for multiple positions. It's primarily the administrative positions. So we have administrative specialists, senior administrative specialists, office coordinator. They're all lumped under the same title. And if a position in a department, if their duties change, then they need to be, the position gets reallocated to a different classification, but it doesn't, so that person, the person that holds it, their title would change, but the plan doesn't have to change because there's an existing classification. But we also have quite a large number of very unique titles where there's only one building commissioner, there's only one public health director. And so those are the ones that it impacts the plan. We really talked a lot about looking to streamline, have more generic titles like analysts and generalists. We found with 190 positions that wasn't as easy as we would like it to be, because those that we might want all to be analysts, there were differences within the classification scores, the factors within departments. And so that was our goal. We made some progress in that, and maybe in the future that would make sense, but it's not there yet. And then other times that title is really important for some employees. So while we work to have consistency in titles, there are employees that hold some titles that we thought, if that's important to them, rather than giving them a generic that this is the time to make a change. So Like one of the appeals was of that nature. There was a generic one, and it made sense. I really think that my previous title makes more sense, and we talked about that. And we had that. So,
So with respect to your example, the building commissioner,
yeah,
what was printed in the finance committee booklet
Yes.
was 14.
correct.
So can you just walk me through the process of how the communication now takes place with the citizens?
Yes.
And how that is going to be processed at town meeting?
Yeah. So, so those that follow the personnel board and see the packet at least could see in the packet the memo, and I've got this version that has strike through and red that shows it in that way. For town meeting, to streamline that, where that happens is through the motion handout. And so in the packet, there's a draft for that, and this is something that needs to be finalized and go to print and get posted on the web as soon as we can. But in the packet, there is a document that's labeled draft of 424 motion handout. And what that would show is that the motion is to move the plan that's printed here in the handout, and that's a clean version in there with these changes incorporated. Of any of them you didn't approve tonight, we need to amend, edit it before it goes to print. But if the last page of that shows what the difference is between the public hearing slash FinCom version, because those were the same, and the one that's being moved to town meeting. So the last page, page 7 of 7, is Article 5 supplemental information. This is how we've done it in the past. I think the last classification study, we did it, and I think maybe the others, but this nature where we outlined what the differences were between whatever the voters had in their hand at the time before town meeting today. And this summarizes, put side to side, what was in the FinCom report and what's in the plan as moved. And again, Liz and I did talk with the moderator a week or so ago and looked at this on the screen, and we're working to work to make sure that was clear for the motion handout. So we've been asked to have 700 copies, so there will be copies for everybody that shows up. They'll have this. In addition, we'll be putting it on the web. The personnel board, this webpage has all information about the warrant article, so we'll get it there. And I'm sorry, I haven't looked recently, but I believe that under the town meeting part of the webpage, there's something for where all of the motion and handouts and information go as well. So that's what we'll be working after the personnel boards vote tonight and what to bring forward. We'll get those out and published so that they're in the hands of the voter.
So that I make certain I understand.
Mhm.
This particular mechanism for town meeting, in which 700 handouts, this is not the first time that there has been a need to make and to recognize a change from the FinCom booklet or from a public session. I mean, what I want to make certain is that people don't think that this is necessarily a unique occurrence. I mean, this has happened in the town before.
Well, what is different in terms of the class and comp plan is that last time there was a draft schedule printed in the warrant. And so why we've had more conversations about this one this time, there may be multiple reasons, but a primary reason is that the warrant did not have a draft plan. And there was a decision at that time that it wasn't ready for that. There would have been that many more changes, and it was still really in a preliminary stage where more employee input was really that. So it was developing. So that's the difference. It wasn't mailed in January. So the question is, how do we make sure that the voters have enough time and enough information to digest this and not to confuse them along the way? And that's where we had the meeting with moderator in December to talk about that. And so there's a difference between, you know, Concord's tradition of how to get information out to the voters, and then what's required under law for a warrant article. And so that was, this complies, and in an ideal world, it would have been printed for Concord, it to be printed in the warrant, so that there wasn't this in between. But there would have been probably a few versions still. There was really a lot, as Joellen talked about, that it's not necessarily common practice for towns to spend as much time as we have giving employees that much opportunity to look at it and look at it again and comment. That was quite a process, and I believe a very, very valuable process. And that's not inconsistent with what we've done before. This was just bigger scale and a lot of questions. So I think that was time well spent to get the understanding and the buy-in and the education that's been happening with employees that are concerned. But so that's, you know, that's the difference. It wasn't in the warrant, it was in.
If it's at all helpful, I have a handout for the budget. And we often have a handout for the budget. The superintendent often has a handout for the budget. So this year we have a change in the budget. So we have a motion, but the length of the motion for the budget articles exceeds what the moderator will tolerate on the screen. So there's a handout. You know, if you go into town meeting, you see a table of handouts. Those are all inclusive of changes that people have made or additional materials they would want that's over and above what was in the warrant. So you won't be the only ones with a handout, for sure.
I sort of didn't allow you to finish your what you were telling, unless you did finish it. Okay, all right. So any other questions, comments from the members of the personnel board on Amy's presentation on the status?
I must comment that I think it's been given an enormous amount of time and energy and really a lot of help to the employees that really came looking. I mean, I think that's really excellent, really.
And I share that. I think this was we've had many discussions over the last many months about communication.
Right.
And I think this is a great example of how we're able to carry forward with that principle of good communication. And it takes time.
Right.
It takes time, but I do believe it's necessary in order for us to make inroads into ensuring that employees and the town citizens, you know, have enough data and information that they can process. So we have any other comments or?
I guess I had one.
I'm going to take on because I'm just.
I have a question about, I guess, the compensation plan and sort of when that's developed for the implementation of the plan after July 1. And I mean, I know you're busy with town meeting. I'm just sort of wondering what the process is for developing that and when that will be in place.
Well, that is the next very intensive work now, right? So next week it will be, that's the next shift. We know what we're working with for our plan. You know, there will be some employees that I still need to just make sure, you know, those with the final review process, but we will be now looking and crunching the actual data, looking at very specifically which employees will need to have a salary increase in order to get up to the new minimum. Then looking at what does that entire range look like in terms of people, where are the pays, as we've talked about, looking at each individual grade, where do they fall? I think and then, you know, recommending a salary increase plan for July 1, which could be a combination of there's the moving them to the minimum, talked about getting everybody at least a 3%, and then really working on what other priorities are there. That is the next, you know, really important thing for employees. And some of those requests for reviews are so, okay, this is great. I see I have a lot more growth, but They're telling me I'm gonna be at the minimum of this new one, so we're gonna have to work our way through that, and I don't, you know, I don't think that all is gonna happen, in year one. We're gonna have to like set those priorities and work with the board. So I anticipate that we'd be doing that in May, and that by the June 14th personnel board meeting, sooner if possible, but I don't know that it's possible, really have that so that we can go and put it into effect for July 1. So that's the
What
next
other
stage.
bodies or people need to essentially approve or approve the plan that you're going to be starting to work on next week?
So there's a couple aspects of that. Under the policies that we have now, the personnel board and the town manager jointly adopt the standard fiscal annual fiscal year increases. And so then we need to be coming to the board. We can be working with the board on any parts of it. There also, the policy allows for the town manager to make adjustments where there are inequities or changes in positions. So the town manager is the one that would approve those individual needs. But in terms of who is involved, it's going to be HR, department heads, division heads, getting input, looking at it. Finance needs to be involved. So there's a number of pieces of looking at that data over the next month.
I have a couple of questions and comments. The first is, in your review, I didn't hear a final figure of how many are outstanding. Last time we talked about, there were about 26, and there were, more than half of those, I believe, were going to impact the plan. Right, so.
Right.
They were divided in groups, right?
Yeah. So that's my recommendations to the town manager last week. There were 6 employees that I was not making a recommendation on their request at that stage. I have met with all of them. And I just want to put it aside, that doesn't include any request that was specifically about their pay rate on implementation. This is really just about classification, because there were a couple that are wanting to know what their pay rate will be. But classification is those 6. I have now met with all of them, and I will be making the formal recommendation on 4 more at this stage. 2 of them I have. But again, they don't change the plan. So 4 employees are waiting to hear.
And of those within, that would change the plan, that was your goal, right? To get through all of those. And is that, you were able to do that?
Right. I completed all those. I've made my recommendations. I've advised the employees. Now, there were a number that I did not recommend a change in the plan, and they've all been notified. But I completed all of those. I asked those employees, each meeting was really unique in a lot of ways. The same general approach, but depending on it, they were unique and what the employee wanted to talk about or was focused on. Where possible, where there weren't things that where possible, I tried to get a sense from the employee at the meeting of what they were thinking at that point. Do you think that I've answered your questions, or, if this were there, would that address it? And I didn't in any way mean to put anybody on the spot, because sometimes that means they need to digest it, when they get the answer. So I, try to get some sense. Then I sent all of them a follow-up email and asked whether they could tell me whether they felt it was resolved and they were satisfied. And I think some people were on vacation in the past week or haven't responded, but it at least indicated that they were. People may still be thinking about it. Even if at the meeting, it seemed like we're on the same page. They may be thinking about it. And then I think it really depends what remaining issue is out there on where it goes. So I've had a couple of employees. And I do want to make note of a few things that it's in my memo, that like, there are a number of light plan employees that may accept that this is the system and the classification may be correct within the system. But the salary ranges for some of them continue to be a concern. And, you know, the municipal light plan market is very different than others. So while they understand what we went through about how the system was developed and the ranges were developed and looking at that, that doesn't mean that they necessarily feel that the ranges shouldn't be wider or that it provides enough growth for them. You know, maybe they're at max, and even if that's, you know, reasonably competitive, that's where do they go. So, and that, you know, I think there are some employees wondering whether their position should be in that specialty group.
I thought last meeting, it was, somebody stated that there was no one who was at the max of the new ranges. Or is that something I think you stated
No, I
that?
think nobody will be over, right?
Right, over the max. That was one of the changes. Have we adopted the preliminary?
Nobody will be at the, how do we, with the 3% adjustment. No, everybody will still be in range of 3% adjustment. Do we have anybody that would be at the top with the 3%? I'm not sure, but we have some people that I believe will be very close to the top. But they're generally very senior in their positions. And we had talked about, at some point, we need to have a conversation about what are effective strategies for compensating long-term employees who are at the top.
Right.
Yeah, but nobody over.
Right, and that came up with a few of the employees. And the other place that is the engineers in public works. A similar concern, but a little bit different. Those are very competitive, and you know, there's the private sector question, and you know, there's a lot of discussion on employees about what Concord demands of its employees that might be different than what other communities do. So, so I don't know that there's, you know, it's not necessarily rejoicing that yes, this is, you know, this is a super competitive plan and all that, but we were able to resolve the classification questions for those employees, at least those that I've heard back from, you know. But again, people are digesting some of that, so if they really looking at it, we can talk about whether there's something more we can do. But if I go through the classification factors in detail with them, I think that as a whole, they could at least get to understanding. There wasn't a question on that piece of it. Then it's a matter of whether they feel that the ranges themselves are competitive. And, you know, again, I invited people to speak up if they would like to, or to come to see, you know, what their next steps would be. But I really think, you know, my opinion is that it's to relook at it again every year, to keep watching the market data and see where we're at, which we have done before. But I think we could make that a process that others see in more detail, and to, you know, rotate some of the positions that we're getting market data for. So I think there are some strategies for going forward. I think this is a, you know, huge step forward, and is really competitive. And I think we to see let this plan settle in. Those are the ones that I was hearing from. Joe, you had another.
Yeah, two more. So on the plan, so we're now at the point where we're recommending this at town meeting, and it's all on the slides. I understand that, but without looking at material, what would you say are the top 3 or 2 or 5 changes with this plan? Right, what are the you know, if you're explaining it to someone who's new to this, or if an employee is sitting in a, you know, one position, but they're trying to understand, well, why was this necessary? Okay, we understand that, you know, the economy changes over time, so that might be one of your answers, but what are the conceptual or cultural shifts, or what is it that is happening for these employees?
Compared to the plan that we've had
Yeah.
to date. So, one notable change is that instead of dividing all of our positions into different groups, we had one called administrative clerical, we had a different, telecommunications. There was really an effort to put them all in the same, look at positions using the same criteria across the board. They were looked at the same way in the old plan, but they were broken into groups. And a lot of those were based on market or job functions. And so it is embracing the concept of equity in a different way and looking at all positions using that same scale. So that's one notable change from place. I think that this plan also did at least a comprehensive check-in with all positions at the same time on what capturing the duties and responsibilities of those positions at that point in time and looking at them together. We have been every year, as you know, because you have actions come to the board, we look at positions constantly and we're looking at them as we're posting them. And we've had anywhere from 10 to 25 positions or more a year that have been classified, but this is one big picture to make sure that everything is up to date at that point. And that's significant because the reality is when, sometimes a position, people don't realize that it's changed over time, right? Or, things that happened. And it's really important to look at that from all of them and make sure there's some sort of balance and system, particularly when there's this number of positions, how much the town has grown and changed in a really short time, for I think in the municipal world in particular. So that was important. And the other is, it's really working to be competitive. Now Concord has greatly worked to be competitive. So how do we want to express that, whether, which percentile, the town manager was really dedicated to making sure that in looking at the data, the 85th percentile, and applying that it was not harming employees, not making sure that everybody still was in there and gave, where possible, room for continued growth. So that's significant. Checking in on that. There were a lot of questions from employees about, is their salary range competitive? Is there? So this is a check-in, and as a whole, we found that it is. What's very difficult for employees to understand, a lot of times people say we're paying positions at the 85th percentile, and that is misunderstood over and over again. So people look at their individual position and say, well, my position's not at the 85th percentile, and that is correct. So one of the things I talked about in a lot of these meetings with employees is, what does that mean? We went back to taking data points, because they might come in and provide data from other communities and other positions, and or say, well, wait a minute, you've only got 3 data points, or you didn't survey mine, so how could it be? So we talked about what benchmarking is and equity, and that this was a system that was built off of the 85th percentile of the market data that we had, and that it also needed to consider differences in ranges and that from grade 1 to 2, let's say 7% and all that. So we said it's about building a plan that works, that's first based on internal equity. So
Okay, I have a question on your second point. So checking in on duties and responsibilities for all the positions at the same time. I tried to paraphrase. So
yeah.
here we generally look at things as one-off decisions. That allows us to look at allows us to look at them all together. We can see that the town has grown and changed over time. So you were trying to, the purpose of doing this, in one of the major reasons for doing this kind of study, is really to get a snapshot in time where you set a new foundation. Okay. I forgot my question, so I'm gonna move on. But the last point that you made about, you know, confusion about what the 85th percentile actually was. I did want to counter, because Bill, you had said earlier, that you thought the communication was really well done, and I think it could still be better. Because if employees aren't understanding what that range is, I think there was probably some pre-communication that we could have done that would have made it understandable. And that's why I asked about these three. What are the three top reasons for doing that? If we'd had a communication plan that helped them understand that first, then when they received the information, it might have been easier. And my understanding is that they received a 100-page report as the first communication of the output of the meeting. And that's a lot for some people that aren't sitting at a computer on a daily basis, right? They don't have access to it. Was it printed in each department as a printout? Did department chairs have meetings where they sat down and talked about these top 3 objectives? Or, you know, there's a lot of different ways that towns in any institution can really help people to feel like they've been communicated with. And my understanding is that nobody ever feels there's been enough communication. So I'm not trying to take pot shots here. I'm just saying that, you know, there's probably more we could do, and probably the personnel board can help with that kind of thing too, right? With messaging and clarifying, or even having more, not public hearings where, you know, it's all in one, but department level, you know, hearings or discussions where, you know, there's more of a, you know, group meetings or something that can move that communication piece away from just HR doing all of it, or, you know, just there's, I think, more in the communication part of that. And, you know, I'm going to be standing in town meeting, and I am anticipating that not everybody's happy, right? And so how and what kinds of questions might come forward, and how should I answer them? So if I put that, if there's a communication question that comes up from the town, how would you think that I should respond to that? Say, no, we did it. What would you like to have stated about this plan and how it was managed?
Well, off the top of my head, rather than thinking about it a bit, I think that, you know, we worked to provide employees with information at various stages. There were orientation meetings. We brought in the consultant that would be doing it. We recorded those. We didn't just hand them the report, but there were meetings to explain that. We invited people to contact us with their questions.
And the meetings that you're describing, were those at department level? Were they, where did those meetings sit? Because I attended one here that wasn't well attended by employees. I saw that. I mean, maybe they were on Zoom and I didn't register that. So it could be that they were underutilizing the meetings that were provided, or maybe we could also, we as a team here could say, okay, that forum wasn't the one that worked. It didn't draw enough people. What other ways could we communicate?
Like the visual of how many people in the room does not tell the whole story. There were a number of people are on Zoom, and we recorded and made available recordings of all of those.
Okay.
So even personnel board meetings, I regularly hear from employees that say, no, I'm not going to go in person to a personnel board meeting. I don't really want them to be involved in that. But I hear there are watch parties. So for some, how many, I don't know, but somebody joked with me and said that they all get together and watch the recording later. So we have worked to make things available. And so the meetings with the consultants and those information sessions and things like that, they were provided in a number of forums for employees to do, you know, recorded and all that. And we invited people to contact us. So, and when I say us, Kelly and I, people were contacting us individually. We were talking with them along the way if there were questions. And then we really worked to keep the department heads involved and informed. And I know that a number of them also talked with employees in their department and worked with them to kind of try to understand things or to, prepare for coming in and making their case. I've heard of situations where somebody was like, I don't know if I want to go through an appeal, that's intimidating, and there were other managers in the department, whether it be their department head or supervisor, that would say, let's sit down and work on what are your points and how can you present this. So I think there were things like that going on around town. Could I say that there aren't, one or some employees out there that didn't know how to do that or to get it? There could be. I think that does happen, but we really work to provide people a number of ways to do it. And again, that's something that GovHR commented is very unusual. I mean, we invested a very large number of hours into continuing to talk with employees and give them the opportunity to come forward. And I'd never say that every employee felt completely informed, but we tried to do that through a number of methods.
The morning, I think you were at the afternoon session.
I was at the
as well.
afternoon.
The morning session was far better attended. There probably were 3 times as many people. And I think we typically find that if we do, we will set up 2 or 3 times in the morning sessions are just better attended. There were a lot of people.
Yeah.
Liz, did you have anything else you wanted to?
Yeah, Kate brought up implementation, and we also have our parking lot issues around implementation. So I think maybe what we could do too, and you mentioned June 14 as a real point where things would come back to the board at a June 14 meeting. But there's some other questions, and I'm sort of, communing with Joe on this, because this is usually the question that he asks, right? Is where are we with the equity within the pay scale, not the actual salary, not the ranges. And so we would need, we agreed that that was one of the key parking lot issues. So when can we have a look at that kind of data? It shouldn't be on June 14, because then if there's some questions and so forth, then it's not implementable in the next 2 weeks. So how should we make a calendar for the work that we should do prior to that, from now till then, which is, as you noted, very tight time frame?
Well, I think that the first pass is really about getting the, looking at every individual employee and seeing what can be done, sort of as an across the board type of change. Whether on July 1, we can have implemented and have a plan in place for any special adjustments, things like that, that's a bit different. So
no, I'm just talking about getting the data so that we have confidence with the majority of things that go forward. So the data that Joe had talked about, and I think Bill had sort of mapped out, was by gender, right? So that it would align with the mass equity law.
right, I guess I was thinking that some of that work would continue on, depending on what we see in May, that we're first going to do the base, and then there may be some. So, and I have to, ask Carrie, is that what you envisioned too? I mean, I know that, the 2 primary pieces or the 3% getting to the minimum, and then seeing what else is there and what funds are available before making additional recommendations or decisions.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so I don't feel that we necessarily would get through all of that by June 14th. All of the getting all of that data, any particular special adjustments, that sort of thing, that we'd at least do those 2 primary things. We may, but I don't know that. Maybe I'm talking about something different.
It seems to me that might be the next step in what I'm asking for, which is evidence, the data, just the data for us to be able to see for the positions where there's, you know, there's a comparison of males and females. Right?
Okay, well, we can certainly have something in May. I think it may be helpful to start with, you know, like a subgroup to work with somebody that's assigned to look at that and figure, you know, how would that come forward to the personnel board in a way that's helpful, rather than waiting to the meetings.
I think it's a good suggestion.
Can we volunteer, Joe?
Well, I think very interested in it. So
Yeah, he is. I'm teasing, but I think,
I think that sounds great.
Well, so I guess my hesitancy about that is that, you know, Joe had talked about doing an audit, or this is not quite an audit, this is just a sort of a snapshot. But if you haven't fully implemented the plan, how can you audit it or audit? and
He
do an
never talked
audit
about
for
it.
the-
That was Amy's
Lab.
response to his request for data, was we can't do a full audit. But Joe never asked for an audit. That's my understanding, is he was asking for the breakdown and Bill, I don't know if it's on record what you had said, but you know, this grade,
I was only trying to get us started.
yeah,
And
Yeah.
by doing that, I was thinking, taking each grade and then having just a little, you put X's.
Yeah.
X's where people are in relationship to minimum midpoint. And the maximum, and then you have above the line males and below the line females, or above the line female. So you're able to actually visually
yeah,
see.
right, if there's a skewing of,
But
by
to-
gender,
but
that's
what-
all.
Right, but
Yeah.
what to do with that is not something that we have talked about.
Yes, right, and then comes what you're saying, right? So you have that evidence, and then do you have to do anything to address anything that we see? But we can't address it if we don't see it. So the data request, I think you said you can do it in May. I appreciate it, but okay, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
it's okay. I mean, I think I was using the wrong term, audit wasn't exactly what, but I guess that's my question too, is that even doable, given that the plan hasn't been fully implemented until July 1?
Joe's point, sorry to be channeling him, so that's the right word, right? Channeling him. But his point was if we implement it without looking at that, then we could be in jeopardy of the mass equity law.
Right, but I thought that there was already, you have a process for ensuring both internal equity and be in compliance with equal pay law when you're implementing the new plan, isn't it, or am I?
So this jumbles everything up in some ways, right? It just, because it's a different system and it's different grade than what we were looking at with data within the old grades and that way of addressing it. So we do need to take a fresh look at all of that. And you know, I think looking at it before new rates are implemented, well, I think that looking at it, taking a spreadsheet, taking what current pays are, getting people up to the minimum and the 3%, and then what do we have? That snapshot. It is possible and can be done and should be done. In terms of the ways to present that and what we do with that, I do think it would be very helpful to work with some member of the board to kind of vet that out, so that it's representing something that's helpful and doesn't send us down a path that wasn't intended, and just kind of to get that ready. But I do think that is an important aspect. If there are things that are identified, then we should be working on a plan, you know, for how do we address if there are inequities, and that's the part that it can take time and need strategies and all of that. So, but we need to see what we're looking at first, like the data part. So I get that part.
So I think you can either look at what we have right now and do some sort of analysis of equity, current system, current salaries, or wait until the new plan's implemented. But looking at current salaries against the new plan is not going to be a valid comparison. And I think and hope we're in good shape, current plan, current salaries, because you do look at those every time we hire somebody and do spot checking.
Yeah. The other aspect of this is those redesigned positions, right? So we have employees that, like I just talked about, that have been, there have been decisions to make some of the additional duties and that part of it, we need to look at what does this mean for employees and where does their pay go to? So there are aspects of that I've been focusing on a plan, so we know what we're working with. And so I certainly haven't been ignoring this other part and looking at and doing preliminary, but to really think through the pieces of the impact, that's where that's definitely next week. But we still need to do a snapshot and look at something to get a sense of where we're at. I think that's what you're asking for. Liz, is that?
Yeah, I think we need to see the data, and that's what we've been asking about, right? Is seeing data so that we can be more helpful and we can actually implement as requested by the Personnel Study Task Force report and agreed to by the Select Board. So this seems to me one of those things, right? And I do understand what you're saying, that you don't want to look at specifically at salaries, but you could break out as you're working through what you have to look at. If you have a group of people that are not up to the new range, right? Not a big heavy ask to say gender split. How many of them are female and how many are male? And then what are we going to do with them? So that you start and finish you start the process with the gender equity component in how you're analyzing how it's going to be implemented. Because coming back and saying, like, after it's implemented, we'll look at it, seems to me a bit backwards too. I'm not saying that, every single person has to be analyzed and but there are groups that you can always split them out, male, female, and then do the work of getting, if you have, the top, you have it, I don't have it in front of me, but it's 18 to 15, right, that are in one category. Is that right? So use that category and say male, female. It's, it's not 100 people there. It's 350 people all over, right? So that splitting each category by male gender is not, to me, that much more work.
Right.
So then, as you go forward with the plan, you're also cognizant that there's, but it's in the data. It's not, it's hard. I certainly, and Carrie, you've said several times in these meetings, fully accept that this is true, that Amy's intention is always to have equity, no question, but the data will show us the proof of that. That's all we need to do, is move it beyond a confidence that's qualitative to a quantitative confidence. That's all.
Right, and just about last week, but looking at it using the old plan and using the new plan is very different. So that's what I mean. It jumbles it all up of what is our approach.
I'm not asking for the old plan. I'm just saying that when you're going through the new plan, gender.
Right, but I just want to make sure that.
Yeah.
I guess I'm looking at it just with a gender focus, because you may have a male and female in the same role, but the male has been here 10 years longer than the female. There are other reasons why one wouldn't necessarily be at the same salary. And so, but if we're just doing this very simple overview of, here's everyone in this role, here's our male, we're not going to see that. And so I'm not sure how beneficial that's going to be.
Well, when do you want to do it then?
No, I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it. I'm just, it's a deeper, the data set needs to be deeper than just
Absolutely,
data.
no question, because then that's where the nuance is really important, right? And then we get to implement, then you get to things like, Carrie, you mentioned that we had also discussed the fact that, longtime employees are recognized in a way that they might not appreciate at this point. So how do we do something with that? right? So there's a lot of nuances that have to be attended to. But one of the ones that the Mass state law asks us to look at is gender. So I'm just trying to get us there, you know, that's all.
I just want to say that I think for the moment, the town meeting is on Sunday, so I feel you got a lot on your plate, to say the least. So that's one thing. And I also think too, that in order to do it right, this would be, and I'm not really into all that, but in order to do it right and maybe get really down to what you're talking about as well, that it would be, personally, I think it would be better to use the final plan that we have for employees so that you can take a much better look. Otherwise, you're going to duplicate because you're going to be looking at the old and looking at the new. So that doesn't make sense. It would be better to wait and do a really good job and hopefully get some help to do it, because I think there's a lot of work to that. That's just my take. I just feel like it's a lot of work.
Wait till when, though, Nancy? When?
Well, I'm not saying a year from now. I'm just saying, once we get through town meeting, once we get through July, the budget and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, then be able to have a good idea of who is in each category, who is in each position.
Right.
And then you go through it. And then if you do look and it looks like it's odd, then maybe you can tell that, well, the gentleman has been here for 10 years. So
Yeah.
you got to spend time on it. And I think that
But
in
the
order to
time
do
is
it right.
The time is that a lot has to happen by July 1. And so how can we as a board help to see
I
those
don't know
right
how
things to
to
do?
do
And that's
that.
what we talked about when Kate brought up implementation now. And as we talked about the plan and passing it, we said these parking lot issues have to be dealt with. Right, and they were part of the implementation, and this was one of the major ones, right?
Well, what I would say that we go back to the reasons for doing it under the law. The law does allow for differences in pay between male and female. So it's not just saying, you know, where are you at in the range? There are, the law goes further. There's a lot of detail that when we talk about analysis of saying, you know, you can have bona fide reasons, whether it be the number of years with the town. You could have it be, the difference could be the past experience, any relevant experience. It could be merit-based if it's a bona fide merit system. And so to really look at the range, if you take any one salary grade, you know, and figure out a longer term implementation plan, we can't simply just map it out as male, female. That does not, no, I understand that.
That's
But I
not
so
oil here.
right. But the part about on implementation where there would be decisions related to additional adjustments and addressing things based on equity have to be part of a more comprehensive look that considers what are those factors going to be that
That
determine.
sounds like a great long mid-range plan. What we're talking, what I'm encouraging is we have Joe who in absentia tasked to support you in the first run. That's all. It doesn't mean the whole thing has to be wrapped up with a pretty bow and finished at this point. I understand that. Nuances are really important. Education level, all the things that are actually in the GovHR description of how you decided what the grades are.
I think the thing that might be getting used in the conversation is when we talk about what the implementation piece of it is. So there's a first phase implementation, and then there's what is the longer term implementation that is based on, okay, we see that there are, you know, males and females here, but that doesn't mean that we should automatically be making pay adjustments and adjusting it for July 1 further for one group or the other based on gender, because there are a number of things we have to talk about. How are we going to determine where people should be in the range, and what are those differences? What are those lawful differences? And that's the part that could be a multi-step. But I understand what you're saying. That's one look, but I'm saying that's what I think.
Yeah.
Maybe in the conversation it changes is, what does that mean on implementation and doing something about that? What are the other factors that are really important and part of really analyzing, looking under that law? So, I don't think we're saying something different.
I don't either.
Okay, so
I think we're on the same page. And I'll call Joe and tell him that I've assigned him to work when he's on a business trip. But all of this, is a good discussion to have now, so that after town meeting, we can all dig in, right? Okay, that's all.
Okay.
An hour
No,
later.
this is really, this is all very helpful, I think. And I think it does continue to promote the fact that the personnel board has experience that it wants to share and is willing to invest its time upon, reason, its time in order to provide that assistance. So I think Joe is probably
Poor Joe.
poor Joe, but no, I think others on the board
Good thing he's not listening.
would be willing to would participate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got we are still on well, we're still on item 3. We do have in the packet the recommendation from the HR director, the town manager. And I think we're at a point now of moving to see if there's any employee comment. Based on the conversations that we've had here in the room. If there is any are any employees and employee, please acknowledge, and we will acknowledge you and you can speak. All right, so I think now we're to public comment. Any members in the public who would like to share their comments so far on the meeting, or so far on this topic of the class and comp study? Okay, so I think we can move on to the agenda item 4. Amy, what do you want us to be able to approve the Article 5 motion handout?
Correct. Would you like to take a vote actually first on the class and comp study, or maybe you do it under the, but so we have recommendations to make amendments. So would you like to vote to move forward with the plan with the recommended amendments?
I think that's probably a good timely thing to do right now. Everyone understand? So I will entertain a motion to accept with the changes that are enumerated on page 2 of 3 of the handout, or the memorandum that was sent from Amy to the town manager and town manager's approval.
Those are the recommendations from HR director. And
So,
town manager.
have I stated that correctly?
Like to move forward with move the plan forward to town meeting with the recommended amendments recommended by the HR director and supported by the town manager.
Right, so I need a motion to.
Sure. I'm gonna give you a turn.
I'll make a motion to approve. I should have written that down. You
want me to try
the town meeting. The amendments to the classification compensation plan as recommended by the HR director and supported by the town manager as to go to town meeting. Is that good enough? Or is that?
I think that's pretty good.
I'm adding in as indicated in the handout.
Yes, as indicated.
All right,
I would
second.
second that.
All right, so all in favor, Nancy Crowley?
Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Cox?
Aye.
Okay, so we're I think we've satisfied that and that need. So we'll go on to the content of Article 5 motion handout. Any question, any comment regarding the motion? And if not, I think we could move forward with a motion.
All right, okay.
Can I just make a recommendation on this one, that, well, that perhaps you want to leave open the possibility that if there's any slight wording changes recommended by the moderator or others as we go to print, that the chair is able to work with the moderator to do that.
Yeah.
I expected that because I think where they are, but just in case there was something.
So, so Amy, you're specifically talking about, so when we spoke with her, she, for example, in the charts, she recommended that we change the second box, right? We recommended title or grade after reconsideration. I think that was what she requested, right? And that's already in there. Is that the type of change?
Right, so not the substance of the class and comp plan. That is absolutely, you know, I would say that you would do that, but in terms of the format and explanation contained in the motion handout, that if a question arose about that type of content or format, that the chairs could work on that.
So then we have to go back to Kate. Yeah. Because you made a motion to approve the CNC plans outlined in the handout unless typos or other changes are required now.
That was a different, that was a moving forward to town meeting with the recommended changes, but this is voting on what the motion for town meeting would be. I guess I was looking at this a little bit different of, you know, now putting it into the format of the motion itself. I guess they're very closely related.
Does that satisfy, Liz, what you were asking?
Yeah, I
There
just
is a
don't,
difference.
yeah, because I just don't think we want to get caught in a scenario where, you know, the personnel board said, we say all these things and we recommend it, but the town moderator could change everything. You know, I don't think we should give that kind of, we have to be a little tight in how we say things. That's all I'm trying to get at.
Well, I think the point, if I heard Amy correctly, was that if there are any additional comments from the moderator, that one of the chairs of the personnel board be advised and indicate his or her approval, their approval.
And perhaps, Liz, like this represents, you know, you were on the call with the moderator and this is, you know.
I thought that was her last chance to give us half.
Well, that's okay. I didn't say get more complicated. I just,
I like to be accommodating. I just don't, yeah, you know,
yeah.
and also it might mean she thinks, oh, shoot, should I look again? And then it makes
Yeah.
more work. And so,
yeah.
I mean, but I understand you're trying to be flexible. I do.
Just
understand.
enough to make sure
Yeah.
that it's clear to the voters and the whole process, not to change content of the plan itself or, you know, just
Okay.
I was just
When-
thinking about. this
700 copies would have to be.
Yeah, I'll be making. that
Right.
tomorrow. So I think it,
Right? So then she would have to do it tonight after our meeting.
Three
Yeah,
reams of paper.
right?
so that's
Otherwise,
probably it. Okay, well, this is fine.
why don't we do that and then, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm just one person, but I just think that's giving yourself more hassle too. If you tomorrow.
I mean, don't you have, doesn't she have I'm going to be an advocate for her. Doesn't she have a helper? So you don't do these 700.
She was used to the
Oh,
royal. I think she's gonna be doing.
I don't know, I certainly have a great team who will look up that. Thank you.
Well, I've got up and down to go to the copier downstairs because I'm only my 700 right now. So
Oh, my God.
Just stand.
That's
Thank you. Thank you, appreciate it.
standing there. thinking, "Oh my
No, I'm not gonna stand at the copier.
So we're gonna move on to
All right, so
the,
no chance, right, for the town moderator, just for the minutes too. Moderator's done. Will be, yes, okay, got it. Sorry, Bill.
no, that's fine. And we've got the, So we're at the motion for the Article 5 motion. Are we finished with that?
I think to clarify that you approve to proceed with a motion to hand out as reflected in the packet. So you know, that
So
nature.
we need somebody to move.
Okay, I make a motion that we move forward with the motion to a town meeting, the preparation for the warrant article. Number 5, the motion and presentation. Oh, that doesn't make sense.
The motion handout.
Oh, motion handout.
Right.
Okay.
So Bruce,
A second?
I second.
Wait,
Okay.
did we want to include language that if there were non-substantive changes for language, they could.
I think Liz does not, is what she.
I don't.
Oh, yeah. I thought it was just, it's not substantive, it's just, you know.
Yeah, but she's printing in the morning. I mean, if we allow that, then that's more work for Amy to go and reprint or something. I mean, that's.
She's already looked at it too, right?
Yes,
So,
right? I mean.
Yeah, I made edits after that meeting based on her comments.
Right.
But I guess it was if anybody found something that was worded incorrectly or not clear and that's supplemental information.
I take full responsibility. That, yeah, but I said,
I tend to lean towards the what ifs, that's what I was doing,
Yeah.
like, well, there was, something we missed, but I hear you, right, it's time to.
right, close the door.
Yeah, exactly. So, good.
We have a motion.
Okay, Nancy makes the motion to move forward with Article 5 motion handout.
Right.
Okay,
So all in favor?
I, Nancy.
Nancy,
Hi.
Kate, Liz, and Bill, aye. Okay. Then we're to the confirmation of slides be used. The slides are in the packet. The slides have been essentially
Good.
worked on by Liz and reviewed by,
I think we had everybody reviewed, right? With the town moderator reviewed. Didn't we? I think we
So I need
mentioned.
to change the page, and now that I know what the handout would look like, I think slide 5, I made it red to remind myself. The page 6,
Right,
it refers to page 6, so there's like that sort of minor. And I don't know when we had these drafted, Liz, when you were working on them, whether there was a reference to the FinCom report, but it may refer to which appendix number, it's now appendix 6 as well, so. You'll have to get that.
so it's also on slide 5, draft is contained in the FinCom report. And we could say at the end of that slide, the specific page, and then page 6 or whatever it is, of Article 5 motion handout identifies changes.
Page 7 of the handout,
Yeah.
and wherever it refers to the FinCom report, you would say FinCom report appendix 6.
okay,
You guys okay with that? That's on
Yeah.
slide 5.
so do we need a vote to, or just this discussion? I mean, we sort of confirmed it. I mean, I don't think we need another vote, but
So, so we did present Article 4 and Article 5 at public hearings, and the slides were updated to accommodate changes and continuing tonight with the 2 that Amy just identified. I thought these slides were very helpful in presenting. So the format, and Nancy, I looked at what you presented last year. And they followed the
And
same
it's
format.
really wonderful. They're just the greatest guide and you go right along with them. They ask
So-
questions. They may ask questions after the first one and you go through it, but
Yeah,
I think with the slides, I don't think you'll get many questions. It's like
Right.
what's already done their thing.
yes,
okay. So we're
I'm fine
ready.
with those updates that.
So again, my point was I didn't think we needed to have a vote to confirm. So
Okay,
we do have, and then the next item on the agenda was presentation points. But I think I think based on actually the conversation that Liz had with Amy, I think I think we
Yeah,
covered a lot of.
Amy
ground.
has requested that they be written out and that's, oh, we got a hand up
Yeah.
too.
Okay, Terry?
Oh, I didn't want to interrupt. I just want to let you know that the select board unanimously voted to support Article 5. And I will be making a very brief statement at the town meeting following Liz's presentation.
All right, thank you, thank you.
Okay, so
So writing them out, Liz, it's just a suggestion, it's what we've done so that we, if, you know, if anything were to happen where you were to get sick or something, that we have a backup plan. Or, you know, just sometimes for the record,
So
we've done
why
that,
don't
but it's not required in any way.
yeah,
It's
and
just-
I'll share them with you, Amy, but with you, Bill, and we'll leave it at that. I mean, I can write them out, but it's gonna be the third time presenting them, so I'm pretty confident in, you know, off the cuff, but I'll certainly write per slide the key points. I might go off script, so I don't really think it should be public, you know, scripting.
Right.
That's all. I don't think it's
I think
as
that would be.
comfortable to read.
that would be fine.
Okay, thank you.
So then we've got the personnel board attendance. And I think I know just from conversations with Nancy, she plans to be there. Liz has to be there. And I would plan to be there. And Kate, are you?
Yeah,
what's your
well,
schedule?
I can be there on Sunday. I'm not sure. Is this is going
This
on?
is a
Saturday?
Saturday,
Yeah, I
yeah.
will definitely be there, yeah.
Oh, okay.
It
So you
starts
got-
at 1, right?
Right, and these come up early in the
Yeah.
agenda.
All right,
so.
good.
Okay,
And it ends usually at like 10 at night or something.
Usually they're pretty good on Sunday, though. They don't go that long, do they? They start at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, so you can get out around.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
6 or so.
It was 10 was the second night.
Second night and the third night, yeah.
so we're going to see if there's any public.
But once you do your thing, you don't have to worry about the other nights.
I'm trying to stay.
No, I'm just saying, there's no presentation. You don't
No,
have to-
right. Once it's done,
So
it's
it's
done.
good
right?
you're on early.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
So we're now open for any public comment. Okay. We can move on to the personnel board charge discussions. My thinking at this point is we could probably have a conversation among us in terms of how we see moving this action forward. How do you see working to have a brand new personnel charge? I don't want to spend a lot of time tonight digging down in the details of that, but I think it's from an overview standpoint, we do have we have the current charge or administrative code, I guess as it's called. I prepared a draft, several weeks ago. There are other town examples. Did those get into the?
What I did was make a reference that they're in the appendix J. It was pretty large batch of papers, so I did. Sorry.
So there are other, on the website, there are other work boards that in fact have, I don't know if it says necessarily charge, I think one that maybe the FinCom says mission. But again, it's not sometimes nice to compare, contrast, see what has been typically submitted, provided in the town. That doesn't mean we can't come up with something, better than that, but it's just always nice, I think, to have a frame of reference. So what I'd like to do is sort of ask each of you to give me sort of your thoughts as to how we should move forward on this. There are several, I think, different approaches, but it would be nice to be able to have some kind of a workflow overview
that we use as a guide to guide us, which needs the input from everybody. So just sort of your reactions at this point in terms of what can we do as a board to move this particular item forward over the coming meetings. Anybody want to start that conversation?
Would you just repeat exactly what to move forward? First,
I
working
knew-
on the
I knew-
bylaw,
I knew-
working, no,
Just the charge, just
just
the
the
new
charge.
personnel charge. The bylaw is a huge project. We need to do the charge first. So, anybody want to share their thoughts? What should we be thinking about? How should we approach this? What should we avoid? What should we ensure? I mean, it's a sort of a brainstorming session, I guess, is how I would maybe better describe it in terms of things that you're thinking about that we as a group should be thinking about. And obviously it's going to be noted in the minutes. So we've got some kind of a basis here for further consultation.
I think it would be helpful to have clarity, or that we develop some sort of clarity for an understanding of what the charge administrative code, if that's really going to be very broad based, a mission statement. So it doesn't dive into authority, duties, responsibility. It's not specific, because my concern is that we're going to end up, we make the code really specific and then we make the bylaw really specific. We're going to end up 5 years from now in the same place we're at now, where our bylaw has been changed, so many times, but our code hasn't been touched. So which one takes precedent? So I think it would be helpful for us to talk about, which one of these documents, because there's, they duplicate. This is kind of duplicating what's in the bylaw. So having clarity on how we're going to approach that.
Okay, I think that's excellent. Any other items that you want to? Okay.
I'd like to have an understanding of where the select board fits and how, because it seems to me that the charge it's under their purview to agree or disagree. And maybe they have some ideas about what they would like us to be doing.
One, typically what happens, just my experience, is that an organization, somebody in the select board level is looking for us to submit recommendations. Then they're able to respond to what the recommendations are. So that doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be that way.
The draft,
We draft,
us, yeah.
we submit, and then if they have input, it's at that time we get it.
Or you provided a thumbs up, visual thumbs up on the.
Right. Okay. Anything else, Liz?
No, I mean, if I go farther, I think we'd start to get into the content,
yeah.
and we really want to look at the structure of it right now,
I
right?
want to have us think about the process and how we do this. And
I was just looking at the personal board, what we present to the select board. I mean, maybe I'm not on the right, but we put together different areas of what we wanted to work on to address what the task force had put together. So, I mean, you got policies and procedures, you got bylaw, and you've got this that we put together. So, I mean, did we put this together? So this is where we were going to start our work.
Well,
I'm just asking,
well, I think
because I think there is a lot to decide where you want to start. I guess you probably want to figure out what is the most immediate thing that we would need to look at that might need to be addressed and taken care of first off.
Okay. So you're essentially, and I'm just going to restate it. You're saying in the process of writing, drafting a new charter, we should take a look at what we presented to the select board several months ago.
Right. But they had looked at what they agreed to, yeah. We would have a starting point, and not be all over trying to find.
I know. Without delving into content, I guess maybe I had said this in the past, but I'm concerned about looking at the charge separately from the bylaw because I feel like they're intertwined. And so if we look at, we make this charge, and even if we make it very broad, very broadly worded, we're not putting specifics in there, but then we go and then we work on our bylaw after, maybe we may end up having to go back to the charge to change it if we change the bylaws in such a way that it doesn't fit with the charge. So I'm kind of rethinking, maybe we need to do both at the same
The
time.
bylaw can't change until town meeting.
No, I know, but we can start looking at it and working on it now to prepare for town meeting. So, and that was part of our plan anyway, was to do both, right?
Yes,
So,
yes.
To that point, it might be helpful for you to have handy that there was a comparison chart that I put together at one point that shows here's what's the law, here's what's the bylaw, the national law, the bylaw, and the chart, so that you just are keeping track of what those are. That doesn't have the entire bylaw, but it's the parts that are of local authority.
Any other comments? You know, from my perspective, I'm looking at, and I know I've said this before, but I'll say it again, is I'm looking to have some kind of communication vehicle that if I was a citizen in town and I wanted to know what the personnel board did or should do, then I would be able to go to this one document, and it's the charge, and that charge would be contained in the personnel boards on the website. So that's, it's sort of a simple way of looking at it. But I think in some ways, what I put together a few months ago, I haven't gone back and taken a look at that again, but it does, you're right, it does present it in a way that and again, it needs our whole, the board's input. But anyway, I do think that there's a value to having something separate. And I would start with the charge because that does not require a town meeting.
Right.
Okay. Any other comments, I think, before we move on? We're close to adjournment, but I do want to recognize the fact that this is Nancy's final personnel board meeting. She'll be there in attendance at the town meeting.
I will be still a personal board member as of Sunday.
And we, Nancy has been a member for 9 years and certainly has served through several town managers, I guess, and chairs of the personnel board. But, Nancy's always.
I think I've always had Amy, haven't I? I've always had Amy.
But Nancy is somebody that you could always count. And it's been a valuable member, someone that I have certainly enjoyed sharing time with and being working on many different items and topics over the years. So we wish you certainly only the best.
Oh, that's very nice.
As you go ahead. I guess the other thing I should have said is that Kelly Hebert's time has she's ended her contract. So Kelly's worked with us, and I just wanted to, I guess, acknowledge the fact that Kelly's contract has come to an end, and it won't be. He was very helpful and certainly very committed to ensuring that the personnel board
and the office of the HR director and the town manager, that she had their interest always. So very professional woman, and certainly somebody that we valued her contribution. Okay.
I would just like to say, to thank everyone, thank you very much, because 9 years, it's been a while since I've been on, and I have enjoyed it very much. I will kind of miss everybody, but I'll see you around anyways. I'm on other town things. But I also do want to say, you know, I'll miss you. And I thought Kelly Hebert, I thought she was great, and I thought you two worked fantastic together. And I thought she was going to be with us. So I didn't realize she wasn't going to be staying. So. All right. Well, anyways, and thank you very much for everything, you know, seriously, and all of you. So,
All right, thank you.
Stop
We could entertain a motion for adjournment. I think and then we'll have a little time with.
So I'll take the motion that we adjourn at 7 PM on the 26th.
All right, it's been moved.
Second.
All right, so all in favor,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Liz,
Aye.
and Bill. Aye. Thank you all. And thank you very
Nancy,
much, Gary.
Nancy, thank you so much for your service. 9 years, long time. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Oh, boy.